Hey guys, welcome back to Little Wars TV. I'm here with Tony, and this week we are going to be taking a look at Age of Hannibal. Age of Hannibal is a fast play system for ancients. It's intended for the army level, and unlike our normal rule reviews, this time we're going to do things a little bit differently. We're not going to give any scores to Age of Hannibal. We're just going to go through our 5 categories. And the reason we're not giving the scores is because, well, our club published and is selling Age of Hannibal to help support this YouTube channel. So
I gave it a 10 in every category. Okay, first category, for those of you who have seen our rules before, you already know, is presentation. So we have the spiral bound, which allows the rules to lay flat. Those of you who have seen our previous rules review know that that's a pet peeve with some members of the group.
Steve, yeah.
We've got lots of examples of play. We have all the charts in one place, and we have these nice cards for the terrain generation system, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Yeah, for 16 bucks, this is a good deal. This is laid out nicely. It looks nice. Greg?
Yeah, full color glossy covers, original artwork by our very own Chow. And the rulebook is only about 40 pages, less than 10 of which is the rules. So it's pretty tightly written, and you know that playability is important here, so we like our rules to be short and sweet and to the point. So if we were giving this a score for presentation, I would hope that it would score well. Alright, our second category for the review is always playability, and this is just a question of sort of barrier to entry. How quickly can you get into a game? And for Age of Hannibal, the basing does not really matter. The figure scale doesn't really matter. It's designed for you to use pretty much any ancients that you have, as long as your basing matches your opponent's basing. Here in this club, we use often 6mm on about 40mm square bases. But years ago, I know we used to play in 28mm.
On some 3-inch bases.
Yep, big 3-inch square bases, but you know, you could play this in any scale with, the bases wouldn't even need to be square as long as you and your opponent were using the same system. So I do think the barrier to entry is certainly designed to be low. A 6x4 table is really the biggest table that you're ever going to need. And there is a points system here if you do want to build points-based armies. So that means that a base of figures could represent 200 men, they could represent 1,000 men. It's sort of whatever you have on hand, which makes it pretty easy to get into a game.
It's a fast play set of rules. It's D10s. The mechanics are very simple. You can be up and running this with new players, and everybody can be following along with the quick reference chart in 10 or 15 minutes. It's not a hard game. There are subtle nuances, but the basic mechanics are simple and few and easy to understand, which to me is the essence of playability.
Okay, third category. This is the big one. We are talking, of course, about the mechanics. How do you actually play the game? And this would be a very good place for us to mention that Age of Hannibal is based on a Chipko set, actually Chipko Fantasy, which came out in the 1990s. And for many years, almost 20 years in this club, we've been using, essentially, our little house rules of Chipko Fantasy to do all of our Ancients battles. So a lot of the mechanics that we're going to talk about in this section are a homage to Chipko, and we didn't feel comfortable just ripping off Chipko's rules. We actually licensed Chipko, so Chip and Curtis were kind enough to work with us on this project. A cut of all the proceeds of what we sell here goes back to them. One of the big differences that we have in our system, big change from the original Chipko, is that there's a very robust pre-battle system. So if you're playing a historical scenario, and there are many of those available for Age of Hannibal, that'll tell you how to set up the battlefield and the armies. But if you're creating your own battle, which is always fun, then there is a pre-battle process where you essentially grid off the table and you lay terrain cards. And those terrain cards, Tony already mentioned, are available right in the book. You can tear them out, fold them up, and it's a really fun way to build a battlefield. We actually are going to have a separate video that's coming out that'll be a tutorial on exactly how that system works, so I don't think we need to spend a whole lot of time talking about it here. except to say that it provides some interesting tactical challenges to set up a game and create a really unique battlefield, and also has the opportunity for you to do some what we'll call ancient stratagems, like a flank march or disguising part of your army in an ambush situation. So I think that terrain card system really adds a lot of character to this game.
The other thing, and something we kept from Chipko's original rules, is the morale clock. The morale clock is a mechanism that controls how well your army performs. At the end of each turn half, the side with the most killed units, demoralized units, suffers a reduction of 1 in the morale clock. Morale clock starts at 9, it slowly ticks down. This does two things. The number of separate groups or single base elements you're allowed to move can never exceed the morale clock. So as your army becomes fragmented and the morale clock ticks down, you start to lose control of your army. The other thing the morale clock does, as it gets down to 4, you start seeing some penalties. And for each further reduction all the way down, the penalties just increase monstrously, so that by the time your morale clock gets down to 3 or 4, you're done except for the crying at that point. All you can do is try and save what little remains of your army from running away. It's a sort of way to end the battle decisively. There's definitely going to be a point in the game where your army is done.
Yeah, the morale clock's definitely at the heart of the game, but to go over some of the other mechanics kind of briefly, it is a I go, you go system, so sort of seesawing back and forth as you take turns moving all of your troops, conducting your missile fire, going through charges and combats, and all of those mechanics are very simply handled in Age of Hannibal because all of your units have 2 stats. They've got a combat factor and they have a rally factor. And the combat factor is what you add to your D10 in combat, and the rally factor is the number you have to roll to remove demoralizations. So that's pretty much it. I mean, it's pretty easy.
And combat keeps both sides engaged in that combat is a compared roll. The defender rolls a die, adds or subtracts whatever modifiers, likewise the attacker. So both sides are engaged in the battle. There's none of that, well, I'm kind of going to hang back and do nothing while you calculate the odds on 50 stands of troops and roll 50 dice. It's back and forth, and so it feels like something is always happening because something always is happening.
And part of, I think, also what makes this a fast play game is that if you beat your opponent decisively enough in that initial roll, an entire base can be killed immediately. So, a quick kill, essentially. So that certainly keeps the game moving along quickly as bases are coming off the table. One last thing to mention on mechanics before we move to our next category is that there's a really cool 2 or 3 page chapter at the end of this that talks about how to do sieges, ancient siege warfare. Something that was always captured my imagination as a kid, the fall of Carthage, the siege of Jerusalem or Syracuse, and I think it's neat that you're able to actually game those out in a satisfying way with just a couple of pages of rules. So next week we're going to have a tutorial video that shows you exactly how the mechanics work to resolve an ancient siege.
And siege warfare is an excellent opportunity to get a box of toothpicks and start making siege towers and catapults.
Which we have done. Alright, so our next category is historical flavor. And what could we say about historical flavor in Age of Hannibal in this rule set?
Well, in Age of Hannibal we have a couple of things that we do to add historical flavor. While the basic blocks of troops are somewhat generic, you have a unit of spears, you have a unit of archers or slingers, we have an assortment of troop types, additions, things that can be added, abilities for the troops that can be added. There's Roman drill, for example, which allows you to switch places, the unit in the second rank and the front rank. We have a phalanx attribute. You could have impetuous troops who are subject to over pursuit or charging wildly.
Celts, perhaps? Gauls?
Could be. But by having those attributes applied to the troops, it allows you to build an army, and there are some army lists in here, so there's some examples. It allows you to build an army that looks and seems and behaves like you think the army should on the table for that particular nationality. The other thing that's in there are some traits for generals. Generals play a role on the table, and there, of course, are the opportunities where you think to yourself, if I just put Hannibal into the thick of things here, we can turn this decisively. And perhaps Hannibal will do that in that battle.
Or
Hannibal could be killed. Which is, in my experience, fairly catastrophic for your side.
Yeah, instantly lowers your morale clock by 1. So yeah, the generals definitely, I think, do add some historical flavor to the game. Another area, I think, of historical flavor would be skirmishers. Skirmishers and light troops are, I think, very well represented in Age of Hannibal as a harassing force that you kind of throw out to disrupt your opponent. But when they die, they don't impact your army morale clock at all. They are extremely expendable.
Well, and I think that's good in that you see many accounts where skirmishers are sent out to draw the enemy cavalry out or to harass the enemy infantry, provoke them into charging prematurely.
Right.
You never see any of the ancient historians talk about what happens to them after that.
Yeah, funny, I don't remember that in Polybius.
They just go away.
They go away. No one cares. Yeah.
That's pretty much how it is here. They have a lot of useful functions on the battlefield, but they go away and it doesn't matter.
Yeah, but that is historically appropriate.
Right.
You know, I've played in other games where the loss of your skirmisher light troops actually has a pretty serious impact on your army morale, and I don't think that it should. So it doesn't in this game, and it's certainly an area for some historical flavor. There's also a lot of historical scenarios that are available for Age of Hannibal. There's 3 in the back of this book, and there's an entire scenario book available for the Punic Wars, so you can get some flavor there as well.
All right, our last category is support. Age of Hannibal is supported on Little Wars TV. There's currently a Carthaginian War scenario booklet available. I'm sure that this being brand new, I'm sure we're going to roll out some more support and some more scenarios as we do some other stuff. The range of support on current war games goes from one extreme to the other. This will probably be somewhere in the middle. We're not going to have a 24/7 call center, are we?
There's no hotline. No.
There's no hotline.
No, I don't think so.
But it won't be, here's a set of rules, and maybe somebody else will start a Yahoo group. So...
No, we'll always be answering questions on our own website for this. As Tony said, you know, the scenario book's out there right now with 16 historical scenarios and a really cool campaign for the first Punic War. And we'll be rolling out more scenario books, so we're going to have multiple tutorial videos coming up to kind of show you how to play different aspects of the game. So we're certainly hoping that over time that the support for the system will grow and that we'll be there to answer your questions. So Tony, for our final wrap-up and conclusion on this, you know, normally this is when we'd be giving scores, but...
I give it a 10, don't hit me again.
Come on. You forgot to add a 0.
Yes.
You know, we both give it a 100, naturally. But other than that, what other final thoughts should we leave people with here?
Well, if you're the club or the gamer who has played Ancients forever and has played all the Ancients rules, and you play Ancients all the time, this might not be granular enough for you. If you're like we are, we play Ancients maybe once every other month. If you're looking for a rule set as an intro to Ancients, you want to try it, you've got some stuff painted up, because there's no basing requirement, this is a rule set you want to look into. If you're somebody who tells me that the tunics on my Celts are painted the wrong color, that's probably not your cup of tea.
No, and honestly though, but there's nothing wrong with that.
No.
I know there are lots of gamers who are really into Ancients and they play almost every week, and for you, there are other rule sets out there. Armati would be one off the top of my head that I might recommend that's got some more granularity and more detail than what we have in Age of Hannibal, but this, like Tony said, was written for people and clubs that just don't play this as often and they want something quick that they can resolve in 2 to 3 hours in a large battle. Age of Hannibal is available, as Tony said, on our website. You can get the print copy. It's print on demand from Lulu for $26, which I think is a good value for a full color book, color covers and full color interior. You can also do the PDF from Wargames Vault. It's a download for $16. Thanks a lot for sticking around for this rule. I won't call it a review, I'll call it an overview, since we didn't give a score. So thanks for sticking around for this rule overview, and we'll see you guys next week for some in-depth tutorials on Age of Hannibal.